We are not from this land. So where are we from, brother? Huh? Africa? Okay, so like which part of Africa? You do realize that there's like 50 some countries in Africa. I'll send my phone number and let's get on a three-way and call your relatives in Africa. Okay, so we can talk to them. Right. Huh? What's the problem? You don't know where your relatives are from in Africa? Huh? You don't have their phone numbers? Huh? What's the problem? Okay, they told you that your relatives are in Africa, so let's call them up. Let's holler at them for a minute, okay? Yeah, you can't because we're not from there. You will never be able to reach your relatives in Africa because we are not from there. Oh, we're making up history because it doesn't go along with what the people who enslaved and colonized your people said. The people who injected your people with syphilis and all kind of other diseases, and they lost their lives behind it. In an attempt to find a cure for syphilis, in 1932, the Tuskegee experiment began. Indigenous men were recruited under the guise of the promise of free medical care. 600 indigenous men in Macon County, Alabama, were enrolled in the Syphilis Project, which aimed to study the full progression of the disease syphilis. The men were in fact monitored by healthcare workers, but instead of ridding them of the syphilis, they actually injected into them. They were only given placebos such as aspirin and mineral supplements, despite the fact that penicillin became readily available as treatment to cure syphilis in 1947. This lack of care is in order for them to track the disease's full progression. Researchers provided no effective care whatsoever to the so-called African American participants. They experienced severe health problems, including blindness, mental impairment, and many of them died. Now get this, some 15 years into the study, researchers convinced local physicians in Macon County not to treat the participants in order to track the full progression of this syphilis disease. Researchers still refuse to provide any effective care for our indigenous brothers. Oh, because the people whose version of history that you believe threw your people in concentration camps throughout the United States, huh? As our indigenous ancestors made their way to freedom after slavery, in Natchez, Mississippi, there was an influx of people. The population went from 10,000 to 100,000 people. So in order to fix their Negro problem, they actually made concentration camps to put our indigenous ancestors in. This concentration camp was formed by the Union soldiers. Their goal essentially was to eradicate our indigenous ancestors. So they built an encampment in the Devil's Punch Bowl where they placed our ancestors. Men, women, and children were locked behind concrete walls, and our people were not able to climb out of it. As it sat down in a valley, which is how it got its name, that was shaped like a punch bowl, many of them had succumbed to smallpox. Many of them starved to death because they weren't able to get out. Our indigenous ancestors banged on the walls. They hollered and screamed and just begged, "Oh, look, we'll go here, we'll go there. If you just let us out anywhere but here." Their cries for help were ignored. In less than a year, over 20,000 of our people lost their lives because of this. Many of the men that escaped were actually forced back into hard labor. Look at here, brothers and sisters. This brother's trying to assert that we are completely changing what Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X said about us being indigenous people here in this land. We have been fed lies. So I'm not about lies. I'm just trying to work my way through the lies, you know what I'm saying, and find the truth. So I'll let you decide for yourself after you listen to what Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X have to say. Tell me what you think about it.
The Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. Exile in his own land. Exile in his own land.
Let's hear from Malcolm X.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. You never find a white aborigine. Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American. Aborigine actually means from the beginning. Two Latin words. Ab meaning from, origine meaning the beginning.
And so you're going to sit here and tell me that people who have committed all those atrocities against you, paper genocide against us as a people, enslaved us, colonized us, cut off limbs, mass genocide, shoot our people down in the streets, unprovoked. So their version of history is more credible than your own people who are trying to wake you up. You got issues.